since even Chuck E. Cheese, the closest thing to Freddy Fazbear's in our world, obviously, still only has the most simple robotic abilities known to man, despite the popularity of Five Nights at Freddy's and their ability to capitalize on that trend by taking some of those concepts, like the advanced robotics, not the dead kids, and then converting them into real life. Because like the concepts in the actual pizzeria, not having kids go missing, like I said, that's a bad idea. Although based on comments left on previous videos, especially about how a real life Freddy's would happen, there have been plenty of people that are willing to die, or more likely to go to Chuck E. Cheese if it was more dangerous for some reason. Y'all are weird. But one final query. How would YouTubers handle it? Clearly, there are YouTubers in this world thanks to the mention of MatPat, or at the very least Game Theory in the Fazbear Frights books, so what of the others? Well, we would most likely not be talking about FNAF. Something that I'm sure a lot of you would enjoy, but also something that you wouldn't be aware of, which is a whole other can of worms that I won't be getting into today, because you wouldn't know about FNAF because FNAF wouldn't be a thing. However, I'm sure that there would be plenty of true crime and conspiracy YouTubers heading to a or the same Freddy Fazbear's where the kids went missing in order to solve the case. Or really just talk about it and get nowhere with it. Sounds like someone I know. Since they don't have the clearance or the equipment to do an actual investigation, or on a potentially closed case. Shane Dawson would 100% have gone there for that same conspiracy theory video, and the psychic twins would definitely have showed up at some point and definitely sensed something, but not quite known what it was. Ooh. MatPat may have made a food theory video about it because he made a food theory video about Chuck E. Cheese, but the thing is, these YouTubers coming to investigate, would they be William's next targets? It's an interesting question because as far as we know, he's only killed one adult, and that was Henry. Every other victim has been a kid, so while they may be in more danger, there would clearly be a bigger issue in trying to deal with these YouTubers, especially if they get killed or die mysteriously shortly after visiting a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. It would probably start some form of curse rumor that would only get more people to go there to try to solve that case. But how would Freddy's have dealt with the pandemic? Would they have made enough to survive the years of quarantine? Or would they, like our Chuck E. Cheese, have to file for bankruptcy? Would they get to open their Pizzaplex? Or would some problematic tweets from William Afton rise and cause the restaurant to get cancelled for calling Chica a he? These are all good questions that we will never really have an answer for because, well, FNAF isn't real. And that's why people keep commenting that nothing in these videos is scary. No, it's not real. Can't actually hurt you. That's why it's not scary. Scary is subjective. Just relax. Now, the horror nights are what I find the most interesting out of these new ideas, with maybe these happening once or twice a week instead of every night like I said last time, thinking logistically and knowing that most people won't want to work all the nights. 9 p.m. would be when they would normally close, so instead, how about closing for an hour while the team sets up for a special treat for all who dare to return. The restaurant could be lit with black lights revealing blood stains on the wall along with handprints and maybe some text written in blood, or paint that shows up under a black light, and not during the day. The lights in the bathrooms could be flickering, and most of the arcade machines would be off, aside from any that make loud noises, distract well, or could scare you. Skee-ball, basketball, balloon popping for example, as well as any custom ones like the FNAF 6 Lorekeeper minigames, or if any of the 8-bit minigames from FNAF 2 were recreated. Obviously, they would include jump scares at the end. The food would be limited to whatever you wanted, probably taking away the breakfast for dinner, and you could have actors walking around in nightmare-themed suits with the animatronics programmed to make sudden movements, since they need to move to keep their servos from locking up, but they can't really walk around. The music that plays could be replaced with atmospheric and scary themed music, like what we use for our videos, with periodic screams and maybe a couple faded door shakes and calls from Phone Guy, making sure that Scott Cawthon makes an appearance in the first Freddy's location. This would be the first pizzeria to do something like this, as of my knowledge, and the possibilities are endless. It would be a great first date as long as you're both into it, and it would increase profits tenfold, basically turning the place into a diet bar with horror elements. Keeping the place open until 2 a.m. when you have last call at 1 or 1:30. I don't know how bars work. I turned 19 and then I didn't really go to bars, and then the whole pandemic thing happened, so I can't really go to bars now. Yeah, I don't know how bars work. I could talk about cash flow and investments, but that doesn't really interest you, I'm sure, because I have thought a lot about this and other opportunities that this would present. So like I said last time, if you want a real FNAF location, share this with Scott on Reddit, Twitter, even though he doesn't use it, Steam, wherever you can. Share it with MatPat, Daco, and Markiplier, so maybe they can see it and get interested too. Or maybe send it to Scott, because I'm pretty sure they have at least more of a direct line than I do. I just say Sky Daddy Scott, please. Firstly, location, right? The obvious answer here is to go with a closed Chuck E. Cheese location. Chuck E. Cheese recently has closed 34 locations across the US, with locations closing in California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. So any of these locations could be used as a potential first location at the very least, with some states having multiple closures. Buying one of these locations would be expensive, and online I couldn't find any real reports on how much it would be. You'd have to work that out with Chuck E. Cheese. However, to open and operate a Chuck E. Cheese location would range from $1.17 million to $1.83 million, with a franchise fee of $800,000, according to Chuck E. Cheese's section of franchisehelp.com. So assuming the higher end of the price range, this would require an investment of around $2.63 million. Not taking into account that these locations are closed and they're probably just looking to break even on it and maybe not make money. But which state should we be selecting? Well, looking on Google Trends, we can actually see what states search for Five Nights at Freddy's the most. Looking for the search term Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, since you know that would be the name of the location, we see Virginia searching it the most over the past 12 months as of April 2021, followed by Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Texas in that order. Comparing that to our list of states, Virginia is the state with the highest search and has a close location in Fredericksburg. And I don't know about you, but the fact that it's in Fredericksburg, you know, like Freddy, that seems like fate to me. But there is also the thought of Florida, who is the second most searched and is only slightly less searched, so like it's like a close second, and has multiple Chuck E. Cheese restaurants closed, located in Miami, North Lauderdale, Miami Gardens, and Green Acres, so there is room for expansion. Florida is also a popular tourist spot thanks to the Disney park in Orlando, where I would go with my family. I think we've went like 2 or 3 times. So it's probably a better idea to go with Florida's Miami location, even though Orlando and Miami aren't really that close, but it's still centralized, okay? And everything's open in Florida, so you can start work on it right away. So the Miami Chuck E. Cheese location is the first one to be bought by Scott Cawthon. What would it look like? Well, many fan creations always make it appear the same as just a normal Chuck E. Cheese, but replacing the logo and text. Probably the most famous one being the image used in MatPat's old FNAF theories. But we could take this one step further. Since the inside of the restaurant is already seen in-game, we can take that same design concept and just convert it to real life. I feel like that's pretty obvious. With the red and black squares along the wall, potentially outlined with additional decoration. You would also need to either replace or repaint the tables and booths and stuff like that, along with replacing the posters on the wall and the banners hanging above. The purple would also be changed to another color, most likely red, or maybe more of the red and black square pattern we see along the walls in the first couple games. Well, first of all, let's get this out of the way instantly. If FNAF was real, it would be horrible. Just straight up. 5 kids would have gone missing on one of their locations and the company probably would have closed down. But let's assume that people would still end up going, whether it's because they didn't believe the lies or thought that the government made it up, or because it's their choice, or because they're a YouTuber who wants views. Why are you looking at me like that? Well, assuming that people still went to the restaurant because perhaps maybe they vanished around the area instead of inside the place, what would it be like to live in a real Five Nights at Freddy's? For a kid, it would be pretty awful, but you also wouldn't know it. The world would be dangerous and anyone could be William Afton's next victim, but you wouldn't know that there was a serial killer on the loose with murderous animatronics able to disguise themselves and hide in plain sight that are willing to kill at any moment. But I mean, like, to be fair, that's also like real life, minus the animatronics. For adults, if you have kids, you may be worried. I mean, any parent is always worried about their kids, but if there was a group of kids who went missing in your area, I'm sure that there would at least be a small amount of paranoia. And honestly, it would be reasonable. I mean, I grew up in a house where my father was always worried. So much so that my sister couldn't walk up to her friend's house up the street without him watching to make sure she was okay. And while that would probably be extreme for most parents, if there was a very real threat of kidnapping, I'm sure that there would be a lot of curfews. For the sake of this entire thing, we also have to assume that the police didn't investigate the interiors of the animatronics themselves, despite them smelling like death and leaking body fluids, including blood. Since that's something literally anyone with common sense would check when investigating the disappearance of children and then learning that animatronics are leaking blood and smelling like a dead body. But what of the technology that we see in these games? Would animatronics that can alter their appearance be realistic? No. Of course not. The spring-locked suits, the illusion discs, the twisted animatronics, and the like are all extremely improbable considering the actual technology of not only our time, but the 80s when this would have normally taken place. At least, if we have a rough idea of the timeline, which honestly at this point, we could be totally wrong about the timeline. The technology in the games is so highly advanced that we have absolutely no idea what else they could have access to. They could have smartphones in the 80s for crying out loud. And if they don't, then William should have capitalized on that rather than murdering countless innocent kids, because he could have literally been a billionaire. The highly advanced technology would have to be disregarded in terms of the abilities of William Afton. So while this seems like a fight that nobody could really win, realistically, it wouldn't be as bad as we think, at least in those terms.
Number 10, William Afton and the leak. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to springlock failures is William Afton. William Afton from the games, that is. In this version of the story, William Afton basically got destroyed by these spring locks. He was fully impaled by the spring locks in the springlock Bonnie suit after trying to escape the ghosts of his victims. He thought hiding inside the spring Bonnie suit would protect him, but hey, he was wrong. It turned out that there was water on the floor which, when he touched, caused the spring locks in the suit to loosen, or water that possibly dripped down from him, and also his breath. This caused the spring locks to malfunction, they fully released and impaled William, ultimately causing his death. However, this is William Afton, so even dying would not keep him dead forever. It would only keep him dead for a little while. We later learned that one of the vengeful spirits, or possibly a pair of them, cursed William to experience the pain that they had felt, thereby extending his life indefinitely, no matter the pain he suffered. Which is how William Afton can be a shambling corpse, but also somehow still alive. And friends, before I move on to this next spot on the list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, and if you love FNAF 2, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Can you springlock a ghost? To answer this question, we could turn to the Fazbear Frights book 135 AM, and one of the stories within its pages, titled The New Kid. In this story, a young boy named Devin befriends the new kid at school, Kelsey. However, while his other friend Mick seems to really like Kelsey, and at first, Devin does too, eventually Devin becomes jealous of Kelsey. When Kelsey seemingly ditches them one day when they're all hanging out, Devin decides to get revenge on him for doing this. Finding a new hangout spot, a now abandoned former Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Devin dares Kelsey to put on a springlock suit. Kelsey does this and begins dancing around, but doing so, of course, triggers the spring locks within the suit to release, seemingly impaling him. While initially Devin and Mick leave Kelsey there for dead, Devin eventually returns to investigate, with Mick wondering if Kelsey might still be alive. When Devin does return, he doesn't see Kelsey in the suit, but later spots a black-haired ghostly figure within. It is implied that Kelsey is some kind of spirit of vengeance, possibly one of the spirits from the game lore that possessed Golden Freddy. And if you're wondering how we know that, well, later in the book we see that Kelsey is alive and well, seemingly, after he seemed to have been springlocked, so either he has superpowers or he a ghost.
And at 7, Phaser Blaster. The whole phaser blast thing is one thing. The whole issue of shooting people in the eyes with like your laser thing, it's not really an occupational hazard, okay? Because it's about the kids, what they're doing. But when you're giving away phaser blasters to kids after they win, and then they carry those around the Pizzaplex, that might be an issue. Especially when all you need to do is shoot Vanessa and she ends up getting blinded for a couple seconds. Like, legit, you can shoot her in the knee and she would still have the animation of going blind. Now, there isn't really a time where you can shoot Vanessa in normal gameplay, but during the daytime, this would be a similar thing. And it's not like they only hand out phaser blasters after closing. That wouldn't make sense. And shooting her in the knee is still blinding her, basically making that phaser blaster just a taser. So you're handing out tasers that kids can shoot at literally anyone in the Pizzaplex. That's definitely an issue. Just saying. Like, maybe it's not specifically outlined in the OSHA documents, like you can't hand out laser pointer superpowered tasers to everyone, but like I'm certain that there's something that would technically cover this issue. And at 6, robot workers. Honestly, given the fact that these are the only workers that we see in Security Breach aside from Vanessa, that could actually be a problem in and of itself, especially if these things are capable of tearing a person apart like we see in the phaser blast ending. Like, why are these capable of disassembling a human? That seems kind of whack to me, especially when the name that Gregory uses is an alias that's not programmed into the animatronics. But that, ironically, could be enough for an OSHA violation, since there is a human worker in the form of Vanessa. If Vanessa wasn't there and every employee was a robot, they wouldn't have to worry about OSHA, because OSHA doesn't care about robots, they only care about people. Hashtag robot rights. Not only would the robots be concerning, I mean, at least I'd hope the robots that are able to kill someone with a single command from literally anyone, even like a 4-year-old child, would be a red flag. But the fact that Vanessa is isolated and the only human there may actually be another issue, since humans are social creatures by nature and require other humans in order to survive. Halfway through it at number 5, superpowered. Getting more into the other game violations now, the fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an issue. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, it's something that we've covered how crazy it is in a couple other videos, but like, imagine if that was an employee. Like, ignoring the fact that it's a spring lock suit, the sheer power that that jaw has is a hazard for anyone who comes into contact with it. Like, god damn. And before you say anything about like, no, the bite of 83 was a spring lock failure, okay, I don't know how many times I need to go over that. It's not. There are no spring locks in the mouth, and the spring locks aren't active because he was already in animatronic mode, so it cannot be a spring lock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful. Coming in at number 4, arson. Now, the whole point of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, aka OSHA, is to ensure the employees are safe and have a good work environment. A pizza place that was specifically designed in order to burn down does not fall under a safe work environment. Like, what's the deal there? In a previous video, I think it was yesterday actually, we literally talked about how Henry didn't give Michael a choice to live or die in that game. He said that there was a way out planned for him, but then he doesn't let us know where it is. And if there was a way out available for us, I'm sure that the animatronics would have been able to use it to escape as well. Meaning that there probably wasn't actually a way out, because like, it would mean that Henry's plan might fail. So yeah, no fire or emergency exit. This is a big no-no to OSHA, especially when the place is designed to burn down, as we see from the vents of the Security Breach true ending.
Number 3, payback. Going back to the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the 1:35 a.m. book, Kelsey, wasn't the only one to get spring locked in the story. When Devin returns to the abandoned Freddy's to see if Kelsey might still be alive, he notices the suit is empty. He thinks he sees something further inside, and so he decides to reach into the mouth of the suit, only for the suit to seemingly clamp down on his arm. Of course, you should never do that. If you see something and you're like, oh, maybe I'll put my arm in this thing where my arm could get stuck, don't do it. The more he struggles, the more he seems to get sucked into the suit. Sure, this isn't so much a spring lock failure from the inside, you know, and no one's wearing the suit in some of these. It's more reminiscent of the bite of 83, because I don't think there was anyone in that suit. But this is still a spring lock suit failing. So while different, I still consider it to be a failure with consequences. Consequences being, you know, Devin also likely died. Number 2. The Bite of 83. Definitely among the most memorable spring lock failures is the Bite of 83. Now some of you are gonna say, Amanda, this is not a spring lock failure, there was no one in that suit that we know of, which sure, but still it's a spring lock suit and it failed, so I'm counting it. Anyways, I feel like the Bite of 83 hasn't been fully confirmed really at all, but many theorize it to be true. Many theorize that our theory is true, that we have so far, because this is all we got, alright? We grab all these little Easter eggs and then we do our best to try to figure out what's going on in the narrative. Now, why do we believe that this could even be a spring lock failure? Well, one, the crying child was crying when he was held up to give Fredbear a kiss, which many theorize is the reason the jaws of the animatronic bear clamped down, as a result of the tears making the gears wet and causing a spring lock malfunction. Two, we have been led to believe that Fredbear was a spring lock suit, so that's also why people suspect that the Bite of 83 could also be a spring lock malfunction. Number 1. Multiple. While Shadow Freddy and RWQFS-FASXC may have been debunked as spring lock failure victims by Scott himself, this theory didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, many thought that they were among those generally referred to in FNAF 3 during Phone Guy's recording for night number 4. Here, Phone Guy mentions that the spring lock suits are being discontinued as a result of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures. Which, I gotta say, it makes sense to me too, because I'm like, what were all these multiple spring lock failures, what does that entail, and how many were there? Oh boy.
In a 9 trash compactor. One of the critiques that MatPat had of Willy Wonka's factory was the lack of guardrails. And you know what? While the Pizzaplex does have some, there are some vital areas that could also use them. Like, you know, just the open trash compactor in the kitchen. Who thought this was a good idea? That's actually ridiculous. The Death Star has a better trash compactor safety protocol. Like, I get children are going missing again, but how is this not getting the place shut down? It's a giant trash compactor that anyone could just walk inside, including us, a small child. It's so powerful that it can destroy animatronics. So why is it just open for anyone to walk into and just like chill? Plus, the button to activate it is just hanging there, easily allowing for it to be bumped. I mean, like, I know that's the point because it's Fazbear Entertainment, but like, come on. And it ate Splashy Bucket. No, this is not a Dude Perfect reference. The giant bucket that we used to crush Monty also, to me, seems like a bit of an issue for health and safety, for both employees and for customers. Because if we, as a like 6-year-old with a 4-year-old's body, can use it to destroy an animatronic, how is it safe for literally anyone else? Like, what's the point of this bucket anyway? Like, is it supposed to contain water? Because when it falls on Monty, it breaks the catwalk that we are on. Like, water, especially in that quantity, is going to be a lot heavier than some ball pit balls. So like, who the living hell thought that this would be a good idea? Like, there's not even like a roof to break it up. That's what all the splashy buckets in like places like Great Wolf Lodge and stuff do. They have a roof underneath it that disperses the water so it's not as impactful. How have they not gotten fined yet? Or like fixed it if they have been fined? Like, yeah, there are guardrails on the catwalk, but that doesn't matter if a giant bucket comes along and smashes it.
Number 7. The Amazing Escape. William Afton in the books is much more lucky, or perhaps just more brilliant than his video game counterpart. At least when it comes to dodging spring locks somehow. Like in the games, he ends up getting spring locked, but instead of being killed by this experience, he miraculously survives, seeming to somehow pull a Harry Houdini and just escape that. While Charlie activates the spring locks in the suit he's wearing at the end of the novel Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, we learn in the next book, The Twisted Ones, that the blood found at the scene ends up being analyzed in a lab and found to be fake blood. Finally, in the 4th closet, it is confirmed that William Afton, while harmed, miraculously survived being spring locked. I don't know how this is possible, but it's a thing that happened. Pretty impressive considering in most other cases, it's pretty much a death sentence. Number 6. Triggered by wriggling off mini arenas. This is probably my favorite consequence when it comes to the spring locks malfunctioning. Likely because you yourself actually get to experience failure in a way. But obviously not in real life because that would be awful and horrible and extremely painful. Instead, you experience it in game. So although you can't feel it, you can't imagine what it would feel like, which honestly is also terrifying trying to do. This time when the spring locks fail, it is as a result of your movement. You are the one who must wriggle to shake off the mini Renas, which are climbing up the suit and attempting to kinda climb into it with you. If this happens enough times, the mini Rena's jump scare will get triggered, implying your death by mini Renas. However, if you also wriggle too much to keep them off you, without winding the spring locks back up enough, you will trigger the spring lock's release, which will also result in your death by being impaled by suit parts which are released by those spring locks. Yikes. Number 5. The fate of Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy is thought by some, in regards to lore, to have been a possible spring lock victim. The consequences of this employee's spring lock failure would be, of course, that they died. That's right, people believe that Shadow Freddy, who appears to be somewhat ghostly in nature, is actually the spirit of a former Freddy's employee, who died while wearing a spring lock Freddy suit. It's believed that for one reason or another the suit malfunctioned, murdering its wearer. As a result, Shadow Freddy was born to haunt its former workplace, and was also likely one of the reasons that spring lock suits stopped being used, at least temporarily. Although apparently not soon enough, as there were other failures that occurred possibly even after this one. Number 4. The fate of RWQFSFASXC. Some believe that not only is Shadow Freddy a victim of the spring locks failing, but so is the shadowy figure of RWQFSFASXC. They believe that this shadowy Bonnie was another employee who, instead of being killed by the spring lock Freddy suit, met their end while inside the spring lock Bonnie suit, which also failed. My question is, if these employees happen to both die as a result of wearing and using the spring lock suits and the suits malfunctioning, did they die on the same day? Because if not, why would you ever continue to use these suits as a company? And why would you ever, as an employee, agree to get in another one? Unless one of them was hired after the other one and like no one told them about what happened to the last person to put on one of those suits. Still, legal liability right there. Like, my alarms are going off for like lawsuits. Of course, this was only a theory anyways, and actually one that Scott claimed was incorrect in regards to the true origins of both Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC.
Getting close to the end into number 3, roaming animatronics. Okay, straight up, the whole roaming animatronics thing is such BS that I can't even fathom why they thought it was required. That's not how servos work, but whatever, Fazbear. Especially if the animatronics are hostile and you know that they are hostile. Phone Guy warns us that they might try and shove us into a suit if they see us because we look like a naked endoskeleton, which is already BS because they ignore the endo in the storage room. But like, why would you make this a part of their coding? Why would you let them roam if they're going to try and kill me? Do they look at every human as a naked endoskeleton, or is it just after hours? Like, this is one of the most hazardous things in this work environment, and it's only the first goddamn game. Like, for f***'s sakes, people, can't we just try and be a normal company, even a little bit? But ultimately, in number 2, springlock suits. This is also why I said ignoring the fact that Fredbear was a springlock suit, because the springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard, and they did not need to be created. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for the employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, just make a separate suit for the animatronic character for the employees, so the people who run your business and make you money don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs in the hot ass suits that fail with moisture. Like, seriously, I'm sure it would be a hell of a lot cheaper to make a suit as well, instead of a complicated series of machines that move robotic parts to the side. Like, what's your deal here, man? Why did either of you think that this was a good idea? Particularly Henry. And finally, into number 1, stuffed. You want to talk about safety and health? What about having actual corpses stuffed into animatronic suits that are in front of how many kids every single day? Especially when one of them is known for loving pizza, and in the VR game is shown in her FNAF 1 form to actually be shoving pizza into the various joints of her body. Dead bodies in the kitchen trying to steal pizza? Do I need to explain? Bodies can carry tuberculosis, gastrointestinal infections, along with various bloodborne viruses, and these corpses are obviously leaking since the animatronics move around all day, and not to mention the FNAF 1 news posters that mention the animatronics leaking blood and, quote, smelling like death. So yeah, that's a shutdown, absolutely, and such a huge fine that William and Henry would have had to shut down the company and probably have done jail time.
The menu is simple, since it's on a monitor and needs to be seen at a distance, with a red border and simple sans serif text describing the various dishes and listing prices, with images of the dishes of the 4 major characters on each of the screens: Freddy's Pizza, Chica's Chicken Wings, Bonnie's Breakfast for Dinner, and Foxy's Ultimate Nachos. I was going to do Ultimate Fries, but kids are going to find nachos more exciting than fries, even if the whole alliteration thing makes sense. And while the horror events are focused on adults, the majority of the fan base and patrons are going to be children. Hopefully not missing ones. Obviously, you can also offer alcoholic beverages like beer and perhaps margaritas for the parents of the kids during the day, and all the adults that will be coming in during the horror nights, more on that later. But other than that, it's a fairly straightforward menu. The menu has to be simple for the kids and anyone looking from a distance, and this is the kind of stuff I actually went to school for. So there's always been this desire from the community for a real Freddy Fazbear's, and it's been present since the first game, because for some reason they all think that it's a good idea to have a restaurant whose fictional series is built around the murder of unknowing kids to have a real-world counterpart. And while I do believe that it would make an incredible amount of money, and it could be an outlet for Scott to divulge some more lore to us, there are plenty of sick people out there. So sick, in fact, that they might just want to recreate the games and may just take on the role of William Afton. And plenty of people have said that they're willing to die at a real Freddy Fazbear's as long as they get to contribute to making the FNAF story real. And that's honestly probably why Scott has at one point said that he didn't want to make one. But is this really the case? Has Scott just ignored the massive opportunity he has in front of him in the form of a real Freddy Fazbear's? Well, maybe not, but it's definitely not going to happen anytime soon. Let me explain. We know how dedicated Scott is to dates, both in-game and IRL, when releasing or talking about his games. He released FNAF 2 87 days after the first, like how we were all focused on the bite of 87 from the first game. Any date that he has put in the series has been solid, and even if things are changing, he always stuck to the bite of 87 and the bite of 83. Dates have always been important to Scott. And as any fan of the series that has at least tried their hand at their own timeline can tell you, FNAF 3 takes place 30 years in the future. In fact, the events of FNAF 3 take place in around 2023. And while that's quite the coincidence in-game, because like 30 years in 2023, I don't know why I think there's a coincidence. I think just maybe because they both have 3s. Anyway, the thought is that perhaps, while we may not get a real Freddy Fazbear's this year or the next, that 2023 is a possibility for when a real Freddy Fazbear's or even a real Fazbear Frights could open. I mean, if he started planning now, it would definitely take a while, right? Hell, maybe he's already started planning, but now he has to wait because of COVID, or he's just planning on opening it up in 2023. And by Fazbear Frights, I mean the location of the third FNAF game, not the book series. And I mean, they are going to need a set for the upcoming FNAF movie, whenever it ends up going out, so maybe this is all just getting us prepared for a real FNAF. I mean, there was that Nicolas Cage FNAF movie ripoff that I'm sure was just a cash grab trying to capitalize on the FNAF movie hype before the actual FNAF movie came out. But could this be what Scott was planning from the beginning? Getting everyone hyped for the possibility of a real location, or what a real location would look like in his mind with the movie and the books which expand on the lore, because he was planning to open one for 2023 at the same time that Fazbear Frights would have opened in the FNAF universe. It would make sense, especially for Scott. And he's really running out of ways to give us more lore hints at this point. He's already released 3 full novels along with like 9 books that all have 3 shorter stories inside, and those, and especially the Fazbear Frights books, yeah, don't think I didn't notice the name, all had insane lore clues that helped us distinguish parts of the series that we've been previously confused about. Like how William had survived being in a blocked off room for 30 years without food or water because he was possessed by a kid. It also explains how he survived the fire from FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, and how he managed to get a hard drive in order to possess it before FNAF VR, so it could get scanned into the game and then he would become basically immortal. But now we've seen source code being used as a clue, the names of photo files that we've had to access with Notepad being a clue, audio files, voice actor listings. Hell, at one point I decoded the name of a color and how it relates to the Emily family as a clue. Not to mention the countless hours of searching through all the games and then the logbook, and oh my god. And yet still nobody has figured out FNAF 4. There aren't many new things he could do to bring us innovative ways for hints, unless that's what this place would be for. And he used this place as an ARG of sorts, where you can get lore clues and maybe even some answers to things like FNAF 4, or even who caused the bite of 87, so we can have a definitive answer instead of being stuck on either Mangle or Toy Chica or Golden Freddy. The arcade is probably the biggest reason anyone went to Chuck E. Cheese, the second being the recycled pizza conspiracy, and the third being because of the characters. However, the kids this time around will be coming for the FNAF characters and be staying for the arcade. The arcade could be filled with the normal games we see at normal Chuck E. Cheese's: skee-ball, whack-a-mole, basketball, knock-a-clown, all the rest. However, the biggest showstoppers could be FNAF-themed versions of these games. Whack-a-mole could be Whack-a-Mini-Rena, and Knock-a-Clown, you know, the one where you like throw the balls at the clown or like you throw them at his teeth, could be Popping Balloon Boy's balloons. There could be a photo booth that puts a nightmare animatronic or Springtrap behind the people in the booth for a real scare, and you could include custom games like Fruity Maze, Midnight Motorist, and Security Puppet. There are plenty of people who've made their own arcade cabinets. Take this one from the YouTube channel I Like to Make Stuff. Bob does an incredible job. And all Scott would really need to do is code full versions of these games. Oh no, a game dev having to code new games, so difficult. Actually, not even new games, games that he's already made, just full versions. The games would be incredibly popular and would result in high revenue since they wouldn't really provide tickets, so they'd just be spending coins to play real FNAF games, but getting nothing other than that in return so your prize counter doesn't lose anything. This is how the businesses think. They could also make machines for arcade versions of the original FNAF games, maybe having buttons that flip through cameras and you need to find Foxy before he gets to you or something along those lines. The prize counter could have a real version of the FNAF puppet box there, playing its signature music to provide a reason for why it's still closed. However, this could potentially be opened at night during the horror nights. If not, the person working at the prize counter could simply be dressed like the puppet. The prize counter could offer things similar to the one from Help Wanted, and offering signature items such as stuffed baskets of exotic butters, which have already been made by Funko. They could also offer FNAF Funko Pop figures, with rarer ones being valued higher, as well as potentially Switch and console versions of the games, along with the smaller prizes that are just meant to keep people from getting the big prizes by saving up. You know, the kids will impulse buy them. That's why they're there. This could also feature recreations of things like the Lore Keeper ending certificate, which you could potentially get by presenting something given to you after beating all 3 of the FNAF 6 games. You know, the ones in the custom cabinets I mentioned. There is way more we can talk about this, trust me. The animatronics, if included, could easily be updated with Freddy, Chica, and Bonnie designs. Well, I mean like easy in comparison to everything else that needs to be done. And once that's done, you just need to replace the songs that play out of the speakers and then boom, you got working stage shows. I don't know if Foxy would need to have his own section or if you'd want to like add that off to the side, or if you want to use the kind of like separate stage that's on some of the Chuck E. Cheese stages. I don't know, it depends on the location, if it actually has one. But other than that, that's just more construction work. Now, what makes this different than your typical kids play joint, you ask? Well, it does actually have the FNAF characters, not infringing on copyright because Scott would be doing this all himself. There is another aspect of the place that I think would make this even more unique and bring in more sales. FNAF is a horror franchise after all, and for some reason a whole load of these kids love being scared crapless by the many animatronics. So why shouldn't this location offer a spooky surprise for anyone willing to come after dark? Much like how Security Breach will have a day and night cycle, why not let the restaurants have the same? Where instead of closing at 9 p.m. they swap to a creepy and horror themed joint where the kids can come to get scared while eating pizza and playing games. You know, the lights can flicker, you have people dressed up, like a year-round haunted house. We could even get some of the games we see in Pizzeria Simulator like Fruity Maze and Midnight Motorist in real physical arcade machines. All you need is a TV monitor. People do it all the time on YouTube. It would actually be an incredible idea that would suck in a lot more people and increase profits late into the night. This also works for adults who are fans of the series, who may not want to deal with the children and the kid-friendly atmosphere that the location would have during the day. This time frame would feature actors in the FNAF suits, but not Springlock suits because, well, we all know how that ends. But this would be just like a Halloween haunt for our Canadian friends or whatever Disney does. It's like Halloween Horror Nights or whatever it's called over there. People in costumes who can't touch but aim to scare, maybe jiggling some doors or hiring actors working as kids or patrons who get lured away, maybe even making a Nightmare Fredbear suit. There is so much that you can do. Oh, you can have like Foxy slowly peek out from behind it unless someone like looks or something like that. You can have him slowly peek out and then you can... Eventually, of course, you could expand, opening more Fazbear locations at the other closed Chuck E. Cheese's. And I feel like Chuck E. Cheese would be down for that too, because the resulting competition could help boost their sales as well, since there would be kids who don't want to go to a horror-themed joint at night, but have a newly ignited or rediscovered joy for pizzeria arcades and animatronic bands. And hell, even as a joke, you could open up Chica's Party World, because we all know that Scott's gonna have some form of like ARG with these locations if this is actually a thing. Scott, I have an idea for that too. Hit me up. The menu would serve pizza, obviously, but also themed meals like Chica's Chicken Wings or Bonnie's Breakfast for Dinner, since, you know, eggs. Maybe Foxy's Flapjacks. It will definitely use a little work, but I'm honestly thinking it would taste and look incredible, both the menu and the food respectively. I have a design in mind, but let's be honest, I can't show my whole hand, can I? No, I actually gotta leave some stuff to actually hopefully make this a thing. So, cause you know, if there's some mystery, Scott might actually like, you know, cause we all know how he loves mystery. And Scott, by the way, I'm happy to help. I love this series and would travel to see a Fazbear restaurant like this happen. And if you go with the Florida location like I suggested, everything is open, so you're already good to go. Maybe not morally speaking, but just like roleplay William Afton and you'll be fine. So, share this video with Scott on Reddit and any other media you can so he can help see it. Sky Daddy Scott, please make this a thing and please let me help. I promise I will be professional and I won't actually call you Sky Daddy Scott to your face. Hell, pull a WandaVision and base the series off a new decade each week so we can actually be there for the bite of 87 when it takes place and then gets shut down and then it reopens the next week as a new decade, huh? And for those people saying Scott already said he wouldn't do it, first of all, people change their mind all the time, whether the reason is financial or not, and this place would be a huge success, especially after Chuck E. Cheese closed over like 30 locations. The timing couldn't be better at this point, honestly. The big problem with this is the danger, and while I'm sure Scott would have as many security measures as he could, we need to remember what the story of the games is. It's about kids dying in these restaurants, and by one of the creators of the restaurants, no less. I'm sure that Scott doesn't want to end up like Henry. These issues only heighten when you look at the discussions on this. I've seen comments on our videos talking about how they'd be happy to get stuffed inside of Freddy, and how they'd just be happy to die in Freddy Fazbear's. I'm not even going to make a joke about how you would rather want to be stuffed into Toy Chica, but also the comments about how they want to kill someone in a FNAF location, or how they want someone to kill someone in a FNAF location. No. Or how they want someone to go missing and the story of the games to be real. Look, I know you guys love the game, okay? I love it too. The story is incredible and cryptic in all the best ways. But what the hell? Like comments from the last video talking about what could be in like a real FNAF. Someone had commented, bro, if this became a thing, I would want to get murdered so I can possess a suit. That would be so epic. Ah, yes. No. It wouldn't be epic because you'd be dead. Possession isn't a real thing in the real world, okay? And even if it was, we don't know how it works. It's not like if there's a real world version of FNAF, that agony will be what determines you possessing something, okay? If possession was real, it wouldn't be something that's simple and it wouldn't be something you can control. And at that point, if you want to be murdered, it's not murder. Okay? It's self-assisted murder. Because, you know, if I say the actual word, YouTube's gonna flag this video. But that wouldn't cause you agony. You'd be happy to die. It wouldn't even work in the FNAF universe sense. But it's reasons like those that will ultimately get Scott to shut down this idea permanently. And even if they're meant as jokes, he probably wouldn't want to take the chance because, well, they may not all be jokes. And if anyone got hurt or worse because of something he opened, honestly, I don't think any of us would be able to forgive ourselves if we were the cause of that. Like if we were in Scott's shoes and we opened a Fazbear restaurant and then someone ended up getting killed because of the games and the restaurant, I wouldn't be able to handle it, I know that. Even for asking for it so much that he felt like he had to do it. So stop saying crazy shit like that. You know for a fact that you don't want to get killed at the place, even if it's what the original games do or whatever. That's not fun, it's not cool, don't say it. It won't help the situation. So if you really want a real FNAF, stop saying it so you can get killed there, okay? I can't believe that I had to say that. So is there a secret plan to open a real FNAF location in 2023? Probably not, but there very well could be. I went over the interior design in the last part briefly, but only offered ideas instead of actually providing examples. So let's do that. Like I said last time, I think the purple sections of the wall should be replaced with red and black squares like we see in the original maps. And the white and black squares with the red outlines on the walls should go around the joint as well. We've seen the interior in the first few games, so we might as well just recreate something similar. The booths could just be repainted, or they could be separated into sections based on what animatronic is your favorite. Same with the party tables, with sections for Foxy, Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy, with posters for each characters indicating those sections, as well as banners to indicate it overhead so you can see it at a glance. The stage may come with a separate section for Foxy known as the Galaxy stage for Chuck E. Cheese, which would easily be converted into Pirates Cove. It's already a circle, you just put up a curtain.